Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. We're going to now have a look at the sort of third pillar, if you like, of the ICT programs, which is financial crime. And I think financial crime is probably becoming a key focus. Now, I've worked in various industries. I've worked with law enforcement, I've worked in prosecuting agencies, and I've worked in now for the ICA for 9 years. And I would say this is probably the broadest syllabus that we have, because it recognises that financial crime is a wide, holistic issue. For example, fraud, anti-money laundering, bribery and corruption, insider dealing, cybercrime, they are all intrinsically related. And it's actually very artificial to look at it in pocketed silos. And certainly, there's been a change in regulatory focus around the world when we talk about financial crime. So, again, we know that serious and organised crime is a rapidly mutating threat. The sophistication and the sheer breadth of organised crime is frightening. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. We also know that a big focus from regulators is swung towards organisations not just protecting themselves against financial crime, but looking after their consumers. For example, I was having a very interesting debate with a series of organisations a couple of weeks ago in a forum that I run, where we were talking about vulnerable customers. Now, that is a very topical area. First of which the question to ask is, how do you define vulnerable? Just because someone is perhaps elderly, does that make them automatically vulnerable? If someone has a learning difficulty, does that make them vulnerable? It's a very sensitive issue. And then, of course, what do you do about these type of customers? And we know that the regulator is looking increasingly at firms and saying, what are you doing proactively to protect your customers, not just yourselves? We know as well the risks of getting this wrong are enormous, not least in terms of criminal sanctions, but also civil litigation. And we'll be talking about the risks of that a lot on this program. So I'm seeing a move back to firms looking at financial crime in the broader perspective. I still work with a lot of Tier 1 institutions which are still very siloed. They have a fraud team, they have an AML team, they have an anti-bribery and corruption team, and it's very disparate. And that's dangerous. The approach to a risk-based approach, which is something we look at on the financial crime and the anti-money laundering program, is all about giving you the tools to do practical risk assessments in your business. It's to say, where are we most vulnerable for fraud, for bribery? Because there's no point, is there, designing controls in an organisation until you understand where you're at risk. And what regulators are saying, they're saying to you, no one understands your organisation better than you do. So off you go, you do a risk assessment for bribery, for fraud, for money laundering. And you design controls that you believe are proportionate to those risks. And then we reserve the right to come in and evaluate what you've done. And by the way, we see all your peer group as well. So we'll be gauging what you've done by what they do. So this course is all about giving you that understanding of what peer groups are doing, what regulatory expectations are, and what good looks like, and what bad looks like. And believe me, there's a lot of bad out there still. So, organised crime. And some of the figures. This is a snapshot from the NCA, National Crime Agency. We get quite a lot of National Crime Agency, law enforcement, Metropolitan Police, City of London Police doing the program. Very interesting to hear that synergy between law enforcement and the private sector. For those of you here from the private sector, it's very interesting to hear from a law enforcement perspective about the realities of investigating, prosecuting crime, and also that whole liaison between law enforcement and firms. Whenever I have someone from the NCA doing my course, I always ask them, please, 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 can I have a hat or a T-shirt with NCA on it? They won't do it. Maybe it's a bribery issue, I don't know. But one of the things that many of you will know, it's been touted as the UK's answer to the FBI, and I think definitely commentators and a lot of law enforcement practitioners themselves are still very sceptical about the efficacy of the NCA. But we'll be looking at them on the organisation, on the program. But they've come up with figures. 36,000 serious organised criminals active in the UK, nearly 6,000 organised crime groups which have an impact on the UK. And there is actually a legal definition of a serious organised crime group. I think it's 3 or more individuals acting together in a consistent manner to undertake criminal activity which carries more than 4 years jail. And that's the basic summary. No one knows the true cost of organised crime to the UK economy, but again, the UK government has tried to come up with a figure. 24 billion is the best estimate. And it won't surprise you, the main facilitator for serious and organised crime, it's technology and the growth and speed of technology. So, I mean, you only saw yesterday, HSBC hit by a hack. The growth of broadband internet access, mobile and mobile financial services, these are all vulnerabilities. Cloud computing, virtual currencies, these are all areas of vulnerability. So, on this course, very much practical advice about understanding the broader financial crime risks in any organisation. How do you do risk assessments? How do you mitigate that risk? So, for example, we spend a lot of time looking at the risk of the insider in an organisation. I mean, I've dealt with some very complex, interesting internal frauds. When you manage and mitigate an internal fraud, there's a huge number of considerations. Everything from who do you tell about the fraud, how do you ensure it never happens again, how do you manage the competing HR and legal aspects, and how do you recruit your staff, how do you exit your staff, how do you control their systems access? There are so many things to consider there. We'll be looking at a wide range of different fraud types, everything from very sophisticated commercial fraud, accountancy-based frauds, down to standard business frauds, invoicing frauds, teaming and lading. I don't know if that's a term any of you come across. Advance fee frauds that hit businesses. We'll be looking at HR, procurement frauds, frauds related to suppliers, which are a very common area. It doesn't matter whether you're a regulated firm or a public organisation, these are all frauds which affect you. ABC, anti-bribery and corruption. I think one of the most important areas that we cover on any ICA program. The impacts of this are so pernicious. People die as a result of illicit capital flows coming out, especially of developing economies. And, the figures are very depressing. The figures are getting worse. If you actually look at the amount of illicit capital flowing out of developing countries, it's getting worse, not better. Now, why is that? We debate that on this course. We talk about what the legal framework is, but we actually talk about practicalities as well. I mentioned this, financial, corporate and business fraud. So we look at some of the big corporate scandals, some of the big, the roll calls of names you will all know, Enron, WorldCom, Parmalat, Madoff. And what's amazing is when you actually look at the academic research and the facts behind all of these scandals, the same themes come out again and again and again. And we can learn from these huge scandals. And we'll be pulling the bones out of them on the program. Electronic crime and data security. Again, the latest threats. Now, the biggest vulnerability in any organisation is something I would describe in what's been referred to as wetware. Have you heard that? Come across that term? Anyone know what wetware is? We've all heard of hardware and software. Any idea what wetware is? I know you know. It's people. And that is your biggest vulnerability. And do you know what? I don't know about you, but in my career, I've been in organisations where people look at these topics and they think, oh my God, this is dry. But I tell you what, if you don't train everyone in your organisation, from the person at the very front line to the person at the highest level, about the practicalities of this topic, it could destroy your organisation. And that is not an exaggeration. So we'll be talking about how you actually embed data security good practice and protect yourself against electronic crime. You don't have to be an IT technician to understand some of the fundamental concepts. This course is all about giving you the techniques to ask the right questions. So when you're in a risk committee and a bloke from IT comes along and starts to bamboozle people with jargon, you have enough ammunition to ask the right questions. For example, if you're developing a new business initiative, you're launching a new customer platform, and you're looking at the project plan, you should be challenging the right of third-party contractors to access your customer data. You should be asking questions about controls around your cloud computing proposals. All of these practical issues we will be drilling down to, because the days of compliance practitioners being able to ignore e-crime, the IT dimension to the role, are long gone. Many of you here will work with commercial databases, commercial anti-financial crime solutions around fraud databases, electronic tools and support as well. And understanding the parameters and getting the best out of those is also looked at on the course. Investigation, prosecution and recovery. So, investigating financial crime, perhaps launching a big internal investigation to a significant fraud. We talk about practical case studies. We give you a scenario. You're at your desk. In my experience, the big fraud incidents or financial crime disasters, for some reason, they always happen on a Friday afternoon. I don't know what it is, but it's uncanny. It's absolutely uncanny. Now, so when that horrible phone call happens on a Friday afternoon, what plan, what response should you have to deal with these issues? Because there are a lot of competing considerations. You know, not least protecting your own people. You have a duty of care to people in your own organisation. So, you know, a very interesting area this. And we also look at the law enforcement side of the equation here in terms of recovery of criminal property. Very interesting part of the program. So again, as we've heard already, these courses range right through from entry level, the certificate level programs, right up to the postgraduate diploma. And I'm very excited actually to announce today that we do have a new qualification for the first time at the intermediate level on the financial crime prevention discipline, which is a focus particularly on managing fraud. And I'll talk about that shortly. So, anti-bribery and corruption. Again, we know that this affects any organisation, not just financial services. And we're seeing a huge increase in focus on this. We've now had a serious fraud office prosecution of an organisation for the first time for failing to have adequate systems to mitigate the risk of bribery and corruption. And we'll look at that case in a minute. I don't know how au fait you are all with the UK Bribery Act, but it imposes a criminal sanction on firms, doesn't it? Organisations, it says, look, your firm is guilty of an offence if one of your staff or anyone associated with you pays a bribe or receives a bribe on your behalf. I mean, it literally goes as far as someone who happens to be wearing a T-shirt with your logo on. It's not far away from that. And when you look at the enforcement cases around this topic, you will see that it's usually the third-party relationships that get firms into trouble. Now, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of firms have focused disproportionately on gifts and hospitality when it comes to bribery. They think, oh, right, we must make sure no one gets a ticket to a sporting event because that would... No, that is not your biggest risk. The biggest risk is your third-party relationships, the people that are out there winning business on your behalf. Those are the people that you really need to control and scrutinise and do due diligence on. And we'll be talking about a lot of the practicalities of that on the course. Some of you will also be aware we now also have a US-style deferred prosecution arrangement. And I think the good analogy to describe that is like a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Effectively, you know, it is a final last chance saloon. It's a formal warning. You sign a statement of facts admitting certain facts have happened. We've had that now with Standard Bank in the UK. So we also talk about the extraterritorial impact of UK and US law in this area. We look at the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and you probably don't need me to tell you, that, again, the scale of enforcement action there is enormous and continuing to grow. So it's very much about what makes good practice, what makes poor practice around systems and controls. Okay? And we talked already about third-party risk. So this is a case you may not have seen. This is the first prosecution of a UK company for failing to have adequate systems. A Scottish company, Brand Rex, and again, oh, forgive me, it was a company which failed to stop a third-party associate who was going out and effectively winning business for this company, which dealt with pipes and insulation from memory. And, it was that third party who was going out actively soliciting and winning business on behalf of this company that got it into trouble. Now, the Scottish system is slightly different to the rest of the UK, and that the Scottish system allows, effectively, if a firm holds their hand up and self-discloses, for a civil settlement, which is what happened in this case. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service in England and Wales has said unilaterally, no, we will not go down that route in the rest of the UK. So if your firm gets prosecuted for this, you will be facing criminal sanctions. Okay? Now, they admitted they didn't have adequate systems to stop their third parties paying these bribes. Very interesting case. And we will look at many other cases. Coming back to electronic crimes. Anyone know what this is? A black box, someone's going to say. I'm hearing muttering. The acoustics are dreadful in here. It's a virtual keyboard and mouse. Now, late 2014, there was a spate of this in London. I don't know if you remember, where this shows you actually the point about wetware. An organised fraud ring were walking into bank branches. I think there was one in Swiss Cottage. Anyway, it's reasonably central London, and they were wearing sort of luminous tabards, pretending to be, an engineer from BT. And of course, just by sheer bravado, getting themselves into a bank branch and fitting these devices to bank terminals. And of course, there was a chap round the corner, sat there in a van, literally manipulating or attempting to manipulate the bank's systems. So again, keystroke logging devices, the use of physical devices is still something we see. And we'll be looking at some of the emerging trends on that as well. New payment systems and services. Some of you might be aware of a big scandal involving a large bank in Oman, where an organised fraud group then sent prepaid cards over to New York, and gangs were literally walking down streets going from ATM to ATM because they'd managed to alter the withdrawal limits on these prepaid cards. Hugely internationally organised fraud ring, all based on cybercrime. Very interesting case. We'll be looking at some of the vulnerabilities around that as well. And again, a lot of it is about the human element, the training and awareness, and we'll be talking about some positive strategies there as well. And data security best practice. Everything from physical security, how do you check people that come into your organisation, people that leave, systems access, portable devices. How do you control all of these things and the governance around all of this? Who's responsible for data security? How is it independently audited and checked? Okay, financial services fraud is another area we look at in a lot of depth. Now, again, this is an example of a sort of a workshop exercise we will do. So we pick, for example, a significant type of financial services fraud, and if you don't know anything about it, we will dive into it. We will explain to you the different typologies and techniques used by criminals. But we won't just leave you there, because that's only half the story. Yes, we have to know our enemy, but we also have to know how to stop them. So not only will we look at how these frauds work, we will focus on practical best practice around stopping them and detecting them. So again, I've worked a lot in mortgage fraud over the years, and again, critical thinking is a key defence. Training your staff to ask questions of customers, training your staff, be they underwriters, be they relationship managers, to actually think critically of customers and to challenge. And that sounds a simple thing to make, but for those of you that work with fraud, you will have seen this yourselves, where you come in with the benefit of hindsight, you look at a case and you think, how on earth did somebody not pick this up? And we'll be talking about what those factors are that give people that blindness. Maybe it's over familiarity, maybe it's complacency, maybe it's greed, driven by remuneration in some cases. So again, I won't go through the details here because I am conscious of the time, but it's very much talking about building and controls in response to these different fraud types. And we look at a range: investment frauds, banking frauds, credit card frauds, insurance fraud, both general insurance and life insurance as well. So again, in financial services fraud, we also focus on some of the emerging fraud topics: pension liberation fraud, and all the scams and new schemes. Carbon credit trading, anyone? Now, you tell me, you get a cold call and they say, you've been specially selected as an astute investor. We think we've got this amazing carbon credit trading scheme. You've got to act now. Here's our website, by the way. A few spelling mistakes on the website, but hey, it sounds like a great opportunity. And it sounds laughable to you or I, but the scale of these frauds is huge, and people are still falling for them. Be they land banking scams, carbon credit trading, or just any sort of advanced fee frauds. And we'll talk about some of those emerging trends as well. This is the new program that I've mentioned, the Advanced Certificate in Fraud Management. This is the intermediate level that Bill mentioned before. This is targeted really at people who are perhaps specifically going to be dealing, maybe fraud analysts, managing fraud cases, and the governance around that, how to investigate frauds, how to manage that process properly, and how to deal with a comprehensive strategy for dealing with fraud when it does actually hit, which it will in all organisations at some point. So again, gives you the tools to go out and critique your own organisation and say, right, here's best practice. What are we doing in our firm? And I think fraud, again, in some organisations has slipped off the radar a little bit. And that is a very dangerous position. We'll also be looking at, around the world, what are emerging best practices about managing fraud risk? What are the global frameworks? You know, what is the recommended best practice for having a fraud policy, for investigating fraud? How does it actually work in other organisations and other industry sectors? And again, we've got some pictures there of some of the financial crime prevention program. So, who I dealt with about here, we've got Dawn and we've got Andrew down the back there somewhere. There he is. So, just to finish off, I would just say, again, some of people will often come and ask us, look, which program was for me? I would sum it up by saying the financial crime program is broader in scope than the AML program. It covers bribery and corruption, financial crime in the wider sense in terms of fraud, insider dealing. Money laundering is in the syllabus, but it's lighter touch. So both the AML financial crime disciplines are fantastic, as is GRC. But in this case, I would say if you're looking to perhaps have a broader range of skill sets, the financial crime program is one to seriously consider. If you're considering wishing to specialise more and focus your career more focused on AML and sanctions, then obviously probably the AML diploma is the one for you. So again, they're both good qualifications. If you're torn a little bit there, more than happy to myself and my colleagues to have a chat with you. So any questions before I hand over to Tariq Aslam, who's going to talk to us from EY, who's one of our now I know his results actually, star ex-students. He's got hopefully some positive things to say about the ICT experience. But any questions just around the room? Got one down the back there.
I want to know if age is a barrier to undertake a course on crime prevention. And if you want to start afresh, what are the career prospects? Where do you have to start from?
Sure. Well, again, I think probably the advice would be come and have a chat to us on a one-to-one basis. It depends very much on your background, your educational background, your experience, and that's why the courses have been designed at different levels. So, again, if you're talking about the recruitment side of things, having an ICT qualification will definitely push you up the pile. I speak myself as someone who managed a financial crime team which consisted of AML and fraud people. And when we would interview people, we would do it in a very mechanical way. You know, we look at the CVs, we look at the experience, and we look at the qualifications. So, you know, I would say if you've got no experience or qualifications, obviously to even get in the door, it's going to be a challenge. But getting an ICA qualification will definitely make you more marketable. And if you're considering which level to go for, come and have a chat to myself, Andrew, or Dawn, or indeed any of the ICT people here, and they can give you more one-to-one advice. Okay, thank you. Okay, I can't see any more questions. Oh, sorry, I had one over here, lady over here. I've got a mic coming, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question about the diploma. Mm-hmm. So it looks like this financial crime prevention only comes in a diploma. You don't have an advanced certificate for it?
So let me just give you the context on that. So what we have is a certificate in financial crime, which is the entry-level course, and then we have an advanced certificate in fraud management, but that focuses more on the fraud discipline. you see. But that is within the financial crime suite of programs. So it doesn't go wider at the intermediate level to look at, for example, in any depth bribery or insider dealing, for example. Whereas the diploma level, again, goes out wider again. So it covers bribery, corruption, cybercrime, insider dealing, that sort of thing.
Okay, so for someone who's looking to do a broader angle, but also covering AML, you would say...
I would say either the diploma or the certificate level, depending on your level of experience. The intermediate course that we've designed is more targeted at those people who are focused more on fraud, specifically just on fraud. And again, Andrew, myself, Dawn, we can chat to you about that during the break as well, give you some more context.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Okay, sorry, Michael, we've got time for one more. How are we doing? Ish, yeah. Sorry.
Is forensic accounting a prerequisite for financial crime program?
Absolutely not, but it would be a definite boon. It would help you. So, for example, we do look on the course at what we don't do. One of our sister companies you may have heard of is Bond Solon, and they do, for example, very in-depth qualifications on dealing with fraud investigations and interview techniques, for example. But what we cover is more the governance and the theory and the structures around it. So, for example, managing a fraud investigation, we talk about best practice around collecting documentary evidence and reviewing, things like accounting records and or computer systems, but we don't go into the minutiae or the practicalities of actually doing it. It's more about asking the right questions. But we have had several people who've come from a forensic accounting background, and they find it's a great complementary qualification.
Sorry, just one more question.
Sure.
It's a generic one, but just wanted to know, would you have any statistics across all the programs offered by ICA as to the number of people in the industry with the ICA qualification and the non-ICA in terms of recruitment?
Oh, you're testing me there. Do you know what? I think we've got a lot of figures and facts and figures that we use. So in terms of the background of our delegates and where they go career-wise, and we keep in touch with them. But I haven't actually got a figure there. If you bear with me, perhaps during the break, I could probably have a chat with Lily at the back there, who does a lot of analytics of Lily Harwood, our marketing manager, who does a lot of analytics on our customers and things. Might be able to give you some more information, but not off the top of my head. I'm afraid I don't have those figures. No.